I remember, Reg, when we first met almost 2 years ago now, that was one of the things we immediately agreed on. Was there are a lot of people that don't have these fundamentals, but then it feels like those people that don't have those fundamentals are unfairly scapegoated. To kind of paraphrase what Wes said, it's everybody that's a part of this, not only problem we all need to be working towards solving. It's not just the people that the IT industry might view as less technically capable or less technically savvy.
Right. And the fundamentals come in two different categories. One is skills. And I would argue that most people actually have the skills to do their job better or well enough, whether it's detecting a phishing link or, again, writing secure code. What they don't really have, and where we have fallen down as an industry and as well, coaches or leadership decision makers, is the incentive. Most people that get a phishing email that fall for it, it's not because they didn't have the skills. It's because they didn't take the 3 seconds to look at the sender's email address, hover over a link, etc. And whose problem is that? Like, whose fault is that? Or maybe whose fault isn't important, but who's going to fix that? How do we create the momentum and the incentive so that people actually apply the skills that they probably already have?
Yeah. We have a saying here at Phin. It's if nobody owns a certain thing in our business, whether that's the quality of the product or relationships with customers, just inevitably that ends up being degraded, right? If nobody's directly responsible for it, if nobody is personally held to a certain standard, then it falls by the wayside. I think we're having somewhat of the same problem here. Is it's nobody's direct responsibility to make sure humans are not vulnerable and are continuing to have these fundamentals and take those 3 seconds. And then even when somebody does step up, say, okay, it's like, this is my torch, I'm going to bear it. It ends up being in this, to talk about disciplinary, like almost like a weird, your dad's coming into, oh, you shouldn't have done that. And then they beat them over the head with a stick and punish them for something that might not end up being their fault.
You know what's so good about fundamentals too is it does 2 things for the organization. First thing it does is it establishes the standards, the right things to do, whether it's the minimum things or the things that we're going above the minimum, but it sets like, what are the right things for us to do? But 2, and this is just as important, is then it lets us see when we deviate from that. And that's the problem that we often have, is when we don't set fundamentals and we don't establish standards, we can never see when we deviate from those standards. And again, let's just pick the Colonial Pipeline incident, right? I'm sure they had some standards in place to say we decommission hardware, but it wasn't fully checked. And there's multiple places where that should have been enacted. One of those should be in their actual physical accounts reconciling stuff. Where is this asset? Why has this asset not been physically placed somewhere in wherever we hold deprecated assets? 2, why is this still showing up on vulnerability scanners? I guess it wasn't, right? But so that's my point, is like, we're missing some of those things in the fundamentals. And so I love Matt's comment there, because that's why we establish fundamentals, is not just to establish them, get them going, but also to deviate, to see when they deviate from the norm.